So this is just a presentation about my road to the Boston Marathon. And that leads to my intention here. It's about running, but it's not really about running. Whether it's writing a book, starting a YouTube channel, whatever your personal interest may be, it's just a metaphor for going out there and getting it done. And I specifically want to call out like what this talk is not designed to do. I definitely don't want to say you should be taking this approach to your work life and be working 20-hour days or anything like that. Please, if anything, I'm saying the exact opposite. That find something that's so important to you that even if you weren't getting paid, you would dedicate this kind of effort towards. And the other point there is that this is a lot about I did this and isn't it great and look what I did. But that's not really my intent here. As my next couple slides will demonstrate, is that it's more that if I can do this, you can do this, kind of a message there. So first, a little bit about my kind of youth, I guess. I was given the nickname Rocky at birth because I came out fighting, basically, throwing punches. Just about born with a football in my hands. That was my first love. And yeah, I grew up basically playing every kind of sport you can imagine besides distance running. I did actually run 2 years of track where I was a high jumper and a 400-meter runner. So up until age 35, I had never raced more than 400 meters, which is about a quarter mile. So yeah, I did not run cross country. In retrospect now, I wish I had. I wish I had started much younger, but I have like no kind of background as a distance runner. And kind of piggybacking on that point is I am actually a Clydesdale in running terms. I put some statistics there about the size of elite male and female marathoners. Compared to myself, I am 6'6" and about 200 pounds, give or take. And not only are the elites much smaller than me, I put a couple graphs in the right-hand corner there that people, the elites are getting shorter and lighter as time goes on. So they're trending to be smaller and smaller. And a couple pictures here you can see puts me in perspective. I'm literally head and shoulders above the field at most of my races. So I'm pretty much like the anti-pattern for if you were going to design a marathon or what you would want them to look like physically. I'm built for a sprinting and jumping, as you can tell here. And yeah, one shout out here to Diane Nukuri in the bottom right-hand corner. She is about 6 foot tall, and you can see she looks like a giant compared to the rest of the elite women she's running with there. So she's awesome. I've actually interacted with her a bit on social media. So yeah, she's a much better runner than me if you need a better role model there. And yeah, the term Clydesdale, if you're curious, is actually a technical term. There is a Clydesdale division, for example, at the 25K National Championships, which I've run at least 2 or 3 times, I think. And there are 2 classes there, with Class B being up to or 200 pounds and over. So in marathon running terms, I'm basically a super heavyweight. Like I'm way over the weight that most top runners are. A rule of thumb is that each pound costs you about 2 seconds per mile, which is equivalent to about 1 minute of marathon time. So if you're 5 pounds overweight, you can drop 5 minutes off your marathon time simply by losing that weight. Obviously, you can't take that to an extreme because there's a minimum weight you can get to be healthy and be able to run. But yeah, and then yeah, I had one comment this last year at Boston that a kid in the spectating the race said he's the tallest man in the whole race. And yeah, if you need more information, you can look up the square cube law, but basically the moral of the story is the bigger you are, the harder it is for you to dissipate heat, and the harder it is for you to run long distances, basically. That's why elephants aren't great long distance runners, and they need to cool down quite a bit because it's very hard to maintain your core temperature the larger you get. The event that really got the ball rolling as far as my career was actually the terrorist attack on the Boston Marathon in 2013. Um, I wasn't a runner then, but even I knew that the Boston Marathon was something that everyday people aspire to run one day. So it really didn't sit well with me that, there was an attack on this event that was like everything that's good about amateur athletics, these overachievers that are, working their whole lives to get there, and to have that attack really didn't sit well with me. In the following days, the Lansing Marathon was actually upcoming, and they were talking about whether to cancel that or not, and the same conversations were going around the country. And I just really felt defiant in response to that. Like, I was practically ready to line up myself and say that I'm not afraid to stand there. And at the same time, I kind of, checked the calendar and realized I was 35 years old. I had in the back of my mind, someday I'd like to run a marathon just to say I ran a marathon. And, I realized my time window to be able to do that was collapsing. So that was actually the thing that really kind of started my thought process towards, I couldn't run the Boston Marathon itself the following year to kind of voice that defiance, but I could run a marathon. So that was really the initial motivation that got me just wanting to finish a marathon. So that leads into kind of my first full and half marathon. I had no idea what I was doing. You can see these pictures. The left is half marathon, the right is my full marathon. And I'm wearing, long cotton socks, cotton shirts, basketball shorts. I had no watch at the time, so I didn't even know how to dress. I had no idea what I was doing as far as a training plan. Originally, I planned to go straight to the marathon, but I was unable to get my distance runs long enough in the winter. So I dialed back and I ran a half that spring, and then the following fall I ran my marathon debut there. And kind of as one data point there to show you how stupid I was, I ran basically 26.2, a full marathon, for like the last 5 to 6 weeks leading into my actual marathon, which, if you know anything about marathon training, is not what you should do. But I just wanted to be sure. My only goal was to finish, and so I figured if I can prove to myself I can run that distance, I'll be good on race day. So those were my times there. I ran a 1:59 half and a 3:50 full, and I had no idea even whether that was good or not. So I was very much a newbie, very much did not know what I was doing. And that sort of led to my first ideation of like, maybe I could run Boston. After my original performance, I was literally Googling, like, what is a good marathon time? Is 3:50 marathon good? That kind of thing. And I casually mentioned it to a coworker that, I only, quote unquote, only had to cut 40 minutes to qualify for Boston. And he made a comment that said, I don't think that will happen. And he wasn't trying to be a jerk, but he was just, it was a lot to, 40 minutes is a lot to cut off your marathon time. So the next thing I planned, my next race there was another half marathon at the end of October, a few weeks later. And long story short, I ended up finishing 4th overall. It was another case where I had no idea what I was doing. I actually showed up to this race and didn't know it was a half trail marathon. Like, it was partially on the roads, partially on trails. And so it was hilly and not ideal for speed, but I still cut 22 minutes off in like less than 5 months from my first half marathon. So that was the first inkling that it was like, okay, I might be actually pretty good at this. Maybe I could even qualify for Boston by spring. And then the other kind of factor into this decision was I lost a baby girl at 7 months gestation in Brazil. And I'd always kind of wanted to do something to honor her memory. That tree there, this apple tree, is at my mom's house, and it serves as kind of a living memorial to my daughter. So I kind of thought that, she never took a breath, much less got to take a first step. So I thought that, you know, this would be a good way. I could take enough breaths and steps for the both of us. And that's kind of how I try to live my life, is like do all these things that she never got to do. And so I actually bought this singlet with the Brazilian flag on it. I put it at the bottom of my drawer, and I said I'm saving that until the day I run the Boston Marathon. So at this point, I was basically all in. And if you're knowledgeable about running, you can probably predict what happened next. But first, I want to give a couple interesting statistics about the Boston Marathon to show you kind of what I was in for. So I put some high-level statistics on this slide just to kind of give you an idea of what I was up against. Roughly 0.5% of Americans have run a marathon at all. It's numbers vary, but it's less than 1%. Within that, about 10%, the top 10% qualify for Boston. One other factor going is that there's only 30,000 spots a year. So even if you qualify, if the spots fill up, they fill up. So the slowest qualifiers may not actually be able to run the race. So even if you qualify, that's not a guarantee you're going to get into the actual race. In 2022, just this a few months ago, there were 120 countries represented from all over the world. And that was probably still down due to pandemic factors there, but it's a very popular race. All 50 states were represented. About 500,000 spectators line up to cheer us on. There's the Wellesley Scream Tunnel picture I showed there, where the college girls line up, and you can hear them from like a mile away coming. It's the loudest section of the race. And then, 1897 was the first year Boston was run after the first modern Olympics in 1896, and it's been run continuously since then. And then, I put some, just to put in perspective what world record times are there for men and women, much, much faster than I am. So as I mentioned a couple slides ago, you can probably guess what happened next if you know how human nature works and training practices. I basically got overzealous. I hoped to BQ at grandma's that following spring. I told myself, you just ran a 1:37.5 on a hilly course. A 3:10 full marathon doesn't sound that far off. I did run my first 5K that November, was healthy, and that was an interesting challenge because I had never run a 5K, and its pacing is a lot different than something like a marathon or a half marathon. So that was kind of working on my speed a little bit. But as I mentioned, predictably, I got injured. The first thing that happened was frozen shoulder in my right shoulder. Went through physical therapy for that. Then I developed biceps femoris tendinopathy in my right knee, which was much more serious, especially for running. I basically was to the point I couldn't walk without a limp. And I went through months and months and months of physical therapy, about 9 months total, I think, and up to 4 hours a day, several days a week. The assistants to the physical therapist would tell me some days, like, you're going to have to tell him you have to leave, you have to go to work now, or he will keep you here all day. So he really drove me back into shape, and I give him a lot of credit for nursing me back to health and getting me in the best shape of my life. But yeah, obviously this was a huge regression. Not only the disappointment of not being able to run my goal race, but like a big setback in my journey. So that led to my comeback in the fall of 2015. I walked a 5K, this picture of me in green here. I was so worried I would be tempted to break into a run that I wore long pants intentionally without shorts underneath, so that I would be reminded to stick to walking. And I did finish it. I did walk. It took me about an hour to walk, I think 50 some minutes or whatever. And then shortly after that, about a month later or so, I was given permission that I could start running again. So on 3 days of training, I ran my next 5K that October. And yeah, it was to this day, it was the slowest 5K of my life, at least running, compared to the walking one. But it was just good to be back. And then I did kind of ramp up pretty quickly. I did set 3 PRs early in 2016 within a few weeks, so I was really quickly getting back in shape, and was hoping that Grandma's 2016 would be my comeback marathon. I'd get that BQ and I'd be back in business, and that was what I had hoped. So once again, it turned out not to quite be that simple. I went up to Duluth there to run the Grandma's Marathon in Minnesota, my home state, and it was 88% humidity at the start of the race. I was literally drenched in sweat just standing around waiting for the race to start, and so I was like, this is not going to be good. This is going to be really bad. It ended up getting up over 80 degrees. The black flags were flying as the highest risk level. Yeah, it was just an absolute horror show. I stupidly and stubbornly tried to stick to my plan and went out on pace, and I was walking basically at mile 13.1. Halfway through the race, I had to slow to a walk, and it was just a brutal. I actually didn't even PR in that marathon. I walked so much that I didn't even break my previous slow PR. And then, coming out of that, I was hoping again to get revenge at Marquette that fall. That didn't happen. Marquette is a mostly downhill race, and my quads were just blown up by mile 18 or so. You can see the finisher photo here with the white singlet. My body language pretty much tells you the story there. I did PR by quite a bit, but it was not even close to what I wanted for my goal. So that was a very brutal race. My neighbor at the campground actually said that must have been a heck of a race just by seeing how I was shuffling around, because I could just barely walk. And then I followed that up with the Chicago Marathon. I had registered for Chicago thinking I would never get in, and then I did get in. So I ended up having these kind of back-to-back marathons set up in the fall. And I did decide to go ahead and run it, but I ran those 2 marathons within 5 weeks and 3 marathons within 16 weeks. Chicago wasn't quite as disappointing because I knew going into it, like, there's no way you're going to run well on 5 weeks of recovery since your last marathon. So I wasn't super disappointed in that, but the fact of the matter is that was 3 marathons within 16 weeks that I failed spectacularly each time. So, more trials and tribulations there. I did set, after that, I set my 5K PR, which is still my PR to this day. But even that, there was a mistiming issue that my official time is like 30 seconds slower than I actually crossed the finish line. I actually have videos showing the clock, and you can see me cross, and it was under 19 minutes, but my official time, for whatever reason, got screwed up. So even a moral victory like that was kind of taken away from me in a sense. And then coming into 2017, I took a hard fall in basketball. Someone undercut me, and I landed sideways on my knee and my hip. And it was very, very bad. It was like I could barely walk again. And then in coming back from that injury, I developed runner's knee 3 times. First in one knee, then in the other, then back in the first knee again in a period of like 6 weeks. And so I had to, realistically, I was shooting for Bayshore as my next target marathon that spring. But I knew coming off that series of injuries that, I was not going to be in the best shape. So I very consciously dialed back my expectations, and I did run a very comfortable 3:20, which was a new PR for me at Bayshore. And I do credit that with building my confidence. I knew, in ideal circumstances, I could do better than that, and it was still a major step forward. But again, it was yet one more failure in the sense that I did not BQ then. So after Bayshore, I really dedicated myself that summer to going towards a BQ at Marquette that fall. In the summer in Michigan, it gets very, very hot, so I started doing my longer midweek runs before sunrise. As you can see here, the one day I woke up as early as 3:30 and got out for a 15-mile run. And yeah, you can see here some of my weekly mileage and some of my facial expressions, kind of reclaiming that term tryhard. If you've never heard of a tryhard, it's basically an insult for someone who's trying too hard at something that, you know, isn't that important. And I kind of took the attitude of embracing that, and you know, I'm a proud tryhard. I know I'm not that fast, but I just have the attitude that anyone who sees me is gonna at least not be able to deny the fact that I'm trying very, very hard. And so that was kind of the attitude I take to it. You're not going to see me smiling during a race. I'm going to be grimacing in pain. And that, I credit that approach to the next slide you'll see. So I'm proud to say I did get my BQ at Marquette that fall of 2017. I ran nearly a perfect race. To this day, it's really the most perfect marathon I've run. I've run faster, but this was the one where like my splits were just perfect. Ran hard the old way, you know, didn't have any kind of a bonk. So I'm very proud of that effort. It worked out to be pretty interesting because the whole way I was overachieving a little bit. I was running like 2-3 seconds faster than I had planned. I had planned to shoot for around 7:20 pace, which would have just gotten me that BQ. But I was trending about 7:17, I think, 7:15, somewhere in that range. And so the whole way I was like, I'm not sure I can hold this pace. I'm not sure I can hold this pace. Didn't feel confident the whole way that I could do it, and I was able to hang on there. The final race, the final mile and a half or so of this race is uphill, which makes it especially difficult, as you can probably imagine, being the last mile of a marathon when your legs are the deadest and you have to run uphill. But yeah, when I got to that finish line, as you might imagine, I got pretty emotional. I said verbally out loud, I said to myself, I worked so hard. I worked so hard. And I was fighting tears, and I kind of told myself I had to contain myself because I was in public, but I was very emotional. I did finish in 3:11:07, which was a BQ by 3 minutes and 53 seconds, which seemed like a huge amount, right? But as it turned out, I only made the cutoff by 30 seconds. So if I had even been 1.5 seconds slower than that, I would not have actually been able to run Boston the following fall. There was a very high cutoff this year. So it was, you know, I was very thankful that I did push myself a little bit harder than I originally planned, because if I hadn't, it would have been pretty devastating to BQ but not be able to run the race. You know, I assumed I was in when I got my finishing time, and then to find out weeks later that it might not have been good enough if I hadn't pushed myself that hard. So that was a very happy day. I was very proud. In the right corner here, you can see my official acceptance into Boston that year. So that leads to the Boston Marathon in the spring of 2018. One article called it perfect chaos, and that's about the best I can come up to describe it as well. The temperatures were in the 30s and low 40s. Wind chills were in the teens. There were gusts of wind up to 50 mile an hour, a headwind the entire way. It's a point-to-point course, and just torrential rain. You can see the first picture here is how I walked to the starting line, and I look pretty much like a skier more than a marathon runner, and you can tell how blurry it is because of the raindrops on the camera itself there. So I'm sure that's not how you picture a marathon runner, but that is how I approach the starting line. And I did take off a few layers before I actually ran the race, but ran in several layers. And you can see, you know, the shots of the rain here. It was just a constant downpour. It felt like someone was throwing a bucket of water in my face the entire race. 60% of the elites didn't finish the race. 23, I guess, a count of 23. and 2/3 of the elite men specifically did not finish. There was widespread hypothermia. I was mildly hypothermic at the end of the race. I called my mom on the phone and I could barely talk. I was stuttering and I couldn't control my speech basically. And luckily she was there waiting for me, and I couldn't take off my pants in public. There was no room I could find to change, so I did change my upper layers, but I still had wet pants on, wet shorts and pants on underneath, so that didn't help me. And yeah, some stories from the race. Yuki Kawauchi won the men race. He was super, super tough. If you do nothing else, take nothing else away from this, look him up. He's a very interesting guy. He's running a panda suit and a ninja costume and a three-piece suit, and he runs an insane number of races. He's a super tough guy, super awesome, inspirational guy. And Desi Linden was the first American winner in 30 plus years. She trains in Michigan, where I was living at the time. And one of the spectators told me during the race Desi had won. And that really kind of put a spring in my step. It made me really happy and kind of helped me, fight through those conditions, because I was really happy to see her finally have a victory like that. And another kind of really cool story was this: Sarah Sellers was an amateur runner. She had run in college, but she was like an emergency room nurse or something like that, and no one even knew who she was. She came in second overall. I think she now is a sponsored runner, but it was basically, like it says, total chaos. People were wearing all kinds of crazy outfits, and it was just insanity. Like amateurs were winning the race, all kinds of insanity. I can't even put into words how tough the conditions were, but you can see me here smiling with my medal. I was very proud. It was not a PR effort, not a particularly fast effort. It was my third slowest marathon at the time, but it was very triumphant feeling to get that marathon medal. And yeah, I did wear my Brazil singlet, as you can see here. So just a quick rundown of kind of what I've done since. I've been on a mission. My kind of remaining goal is to try to break 3 hours in the marathon. I did have 3 first place overall wins since then, and my new half and full PRs are listed there, both of which involved big bonks, so those are a little frustrating. They don't sit well with me because I know I could have done better. I believe I could have run a 3:01 marathon that day and have been really close to sub 3, so I do think that I'm capable of breaking 3 hours, but the clock is ticking for sure. I had gluteal tendinopathy in my right hip in 2019. I went through physical therapy for that. To this day, my right hip is pretty screwed up, and it basically pains me in every single run. And then there was obviously the pandemic, which shut down races for a long time. So that was, delaying my ability to kind of focus on this dream of trying to break 3 hours. And then last summer, had the most serious scare of for my health. I was having some struggles in my training, and I went to visit a doctor finally. And she, measured my heart, and her comment was something like, "These are the kind of results I expect from a 70-year-old with hypertension, not an endurance athlete." And so they thought I might have hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, which basically would have meant not only was my running career over, I might not be able to hike, I might not be able to drive, I might not be able to carry my own groceries. It's a very serious, potentially fatal. It's in athletes a leading cause of fatalities in athletes and basketball players and things like that. The good news there was I ended up getting diagnosed with what's called athlete's heart, which basically just means your heart is super big and thick and strong from being an endurance athlete, but I had to have an echocardiogram to kind of get that cleared up, and I actually have to go in for a follow-up this summer just to make sure it's not accelerating or anything like that. So yeah, that one was a real big scare. But the crazy thing that came out of that was actually the exact same day I got the clean bill of health. I got an email almost to the hour of when I got my diagnosis, saying that I had applied for Boston 2021, but I didn't make the cutoff to run in person, so I was planning to run it virtually. But I got an email from the Boston Athletic Association saying, we have a few spots for in-person runners if you're interested. And it was just too good of a story to turn down. I only had like 7 weeks to train, which is ridiculous. Like, please, take more than 7 weeks if you're going to run a marathon. That's not a smart idea. But the story was just too good to pass up. So I basically trained just to be able to finish that race by whatever means necessary. And I'm proud to say that I did run the Boston Marathon in 2021 last fall, and I did finish there. And then, like, the latest note there, once again, I had yet another setback. I was preparing to run Myrtle Beach as my real comeback race this past March, and the day before the race, I woke up and my back was hurting. And at first I actually laughed it off, thinking that leave it to me to hurt my back the day before a race, but I didn't think it was going to stop me running. But as the day went on, I did get out and run a 4-mile run that day, because I told myself there's no way you're running a marathon tomorrow if you can't run 4 miles right now. So I was able to run, but long story short, I decided that it just wasn't smart to try to run a marathon. Even if I somehow was able to do it, I couldn't imagine it being a good performance. So I reluctantly withdrew from that race, and I'm now targeting a fall race for September in hopes of breaking 3 hours. I'm realistic, being that at my age I'm not getting any faster, so I don't have my heart set on breaking 3 hours. I would love to do that. But when push comes to shove, I'm, pretty content with the fact I made my original dream come true of running the Boston Marathon. So that's pretty much the state of the state as far as catching you up to where I am today. So if you're still saying, gee, Jason, that's really great, but I don't think that applies to me, just another kind of example here in my mom. She ran her first 3 5Ks at the age of 71 a few summers ago. And together we ran the Lindstrom-Loppet, which is basically my hometown 5K. It's where I went to high school, Lindstrom, Minnesota. And we ran that together. We both won our age groups. You can see her on the podium here at the highest level. Yeah, she was also recently in town here to visit, and I took her all the way up to Poo Poo Point and Rattlesnake Ledge here on big, several mile hikes out and back, and she did that at the age of 74. So, whatever the scope of what you want to do, whether it's running or whatever else, just the lesson is don't let anything hold you back. You can do it. So the moral of the story is really just perseverance. I put this quote of Rocky in there, which is maybe cliche, but I find it to be very, very true. You're going to be dealt difficulties in life. You're going to fall down. You're going to get knocked down, and there's no shame in that. The only shame is if you stop trying to get up. So, get out there, whatever your goal in life is. Take it from Rocky himself, as I was given that nickname as a child, and just don't be discouraged. If you take the long-term view, it might take you a while. It took me 3 years to get my BQ, which I was hoping would take like 6 months, but you can get it done if you stick to it. Those are 2 pictures there of me at the finish line, posing before each of the races in 2018 and 2021. So I included some extra links here for kind of further information about running topics and the 2018 marathon, especially, with lots of video there and more information. A link to my Strava, and a few other interesting videos. And yeah, just a few more links here to various articles and information about the bombing, the 2018 marathon. And yeah, some if you want to get a real feel for what the race was like, you can watch some of these videos. It's pretty surreal. And yeah, Yuki, especially, his run was spectacular. He actually went out at faster than world record pace from the start of the race into like a 20-mile-an-hour headwind. So it was like a suicidal pace, and he did several surges throughout the race, and it was really just a masterpiece of marathon running. He's basically my hero for his performance that day, and he's a really inspiring guy. So check him out for sure.